Welcome to A Photographer's Life, the channel that takes you behind the curtain and into the world of professional architectural photography. Join us now for a discussion with members of the Association of Independent Architectural Photographers, America's premier architectural photography organization.
So I want to welcome everyone to the October 2025 meeting of the AIAP. This is a podcast regarding best business practices. And just kind of as some clarification here, I'm using an outline that I used when I was teaching a workshop at the Santa Fe Photographic Workshops a number of years ago. I've updated it slightly to reflect what's going on in today's business culture, but I've placed the outline as a PDF file in the chat window if for those who are on this call, if they want to download it. And I'll also probably make that available to the membership. Well, I'll make that available to the membership after this broadcast is taken care of. But the reason that I decided to go ahead with this is because I've had, over the past couple years, I noted that I've had a number of members contact me with problems that they've encountered, which all kind of point back to not taking care of these basic business practices at the outset when they started their business, or as they've been in business a while and just kind of let things slide. And so kind of want to go through things from where you need to start and the things you need to have in place, as well as the things that you need to continue to do as you're in business from year to year. And, those of us that are on the call here have been in business a while, so this won't be new to us, but let's just kind of go through those. And I just kind of want to start out with the business structure. And when I first started out, everybody I knew was a sole proprietor and just passed through their income on their tax forms as ordinary income. And that's not the case anymore. People don't necessarily do that. And I know that a number of us have decided to become LLC entities or even S corporations. Anybody here that's any other business entity other than a sole proprietor or an LLC or an S corp?
No, I'm an S corp.
S corp. Okay. I'm operating as an LLC, and the reason you do that, there's some tax advantages, but there's also some liability advantages, so that if something goes sideways, people don't come after your house or your personal assets, and you've got a little bit of insulation legally, and also some tax advantages for yourself. And so that's kind of the first thing that is a consideration, is how you do business. Now, I know a lot of people, if they're just starting out and part-timing this, that maybe a sole proprietorship is the place to start, but it doesn't cost any more really to set up an LLC, and it does give you some peace of mind, I would say, and I probably would advise that you go that direction. The next thing I wanted to bring up is the business name. Is there anybody here that's operating in anything other than their own name as the name of a business, or a derivation of their own name?
No, mine's called, because I started it in video, so it was Spectra Video Productions.
I have mine is DocuModern.
Okay.
And I had that name trademarked long ago. And it just seemed like a good name to keep using.
Sure. Yeah, if you get some equity in that name already, then why not just keep with that? Gerald, how about you? Are you?
Mine is Eagle Photography. It has a lot to do with the fact that the eagle was the mascot at the university that I graduated from. So I kind of have a little bit of a interest in that respect. But it's kind of interesting. The other day I was talking to a real estate agent. I didn't know who she was. She didn't know me as far as I knew. But then when I told her the name of my company, She said, "Oh, I've heard of you before." So I thought that was, kind of unique. I said, "Well, that's great. That's showing some positiveness there."
Yeah, some name recognition. That's great. I think it's important to really consider what name you use when you're in business. Like you say, some name you may have already used in other situations, and people have some name recognition. But one of the things that concerns me is that using a name that might have a negative connotation, or maybe a trendy connotation, or something that may not give you some longevity. And so,
One of the things I've heard is a lot of companies want to do business with a real company, a C Corp or S Corp. And I think that gives you a little more legitimacy when you're working with a bigger company.
The other thing I would add is I have a friend that's being represented by Esto, and his attribution is his name slash Esto, and I'm sort of considering starting to do that. Douglas Beck slash DocuModern.
yeah, yeah. I think there's a number of situations like that out there right now, which maybe add just a little bit of weight to your credibility by adding that appendage to your name. So all of those things are important. I think that the point that I most want to make is that you don't want to do anything that might come back to bite you, or a name that you might have to change at some point later. Years ago, I worked for an advertising agency, and the advertising agency used the names of the two partners, and that's kind of traditional and still is. But we would come up against other agencies, and I remember coming up in pitching against a client, and the other agency that we were pitching against was called the Ad Factory, and the client told us, it wouldn't matter what you pitched me, I would never go with somebody that was called the Ad Factory. And so there was some credibility just in using your own name. And I still think that's the case. And so I know that the majority of our members use a derivation of their own name in the name of their business. That leads us to the next point, which is to register that name. You've got to register that with the federal government and with the state. And you may want to trademark it if it's something other than your own name, but you have to register that business name, that business entity, both federally and with the state you're working on. Most of us are all working in the United States, so I won't talk about things internationally. If you don't do that, you run into some problems with people that may register it themselves and then hold it hostage. And I had this happen with an assistant of mine who didn't register his business name, and he didn't get a business license, and he was operating a wedding photography company. And there was an unscrupulous photographer in the area who was not busy, who had the time to do nefarious things. And the scheme that he had worked up was to find photographers who did not have a business license or who had not registered their business name, and register those names himself, and then try to extort money from the photographers whose names he had registered in order to release those names to them. And he had done this to a number, and I only found out about it because he'd done it to my assistant. Not a lot you could do about it legally. I went to the Attorney General for the state of Utah about it, and they said, it's despicable, but there's not a lot we can do about it. So, I think it's important to just take care of those little details to begin with. And the next one after registering your name is to get your tax identity numbers. There's a federal one for everybody. And then you have to apply for these, and they take you a couple weeks to get. And if you do business with any company of any kind, they're going to want to know what your tax ID number is in order to set up an account to pay you. You're also going to need to have a state tax ID number, whether you're paying sales tax or not, or collecting sales tax, I should say, or just to pay your state taxes. So you need to contact your state, and you also need to do this federally. So those two things are really important, is to get those tax ID numbers.
The other thing that companies will require is the W-9 form, which includes the tax ID number, but
right.
It's not enough to have the number.
I don't think you don't have to, if you're a S Corp or something, I don't think you have to do a W-9.
You do a W-9.
If you're self-employed.
You'll designate yourself as an S corporation in the checkbox, and then you'll supply your federal tax ID number. There's the two fields, either the tax ID number or a social security number.
Yeah.
So they will ask for a W-9, and it's to preclude them being liable for withholding, but you do that designate. And I think there's a sole proprietor, there's an LLC, there's an S Corp, there's a C Corp.
Yeah.
And then everything but the sole proprietor is going to use the federal tax ID number, the EIN, employer identification number. So that's another thing, you've got to be able to send those. And I just have that as a PDF so that I can email it to people. If it's a new client, when I invoice them, I just attach the 1099 to the invoice, because I know they're going to ask for it anyway. I might as well save everybody a step and just
that's a good idea.
Just include that 1099 or that W-9 with that, and then they don't have to have your accounting department. And I also always like to find out. This is just kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but I always like to find out who the accounting person is, so that it doesn't have to change hands a few times from the marketing department to get to accounting, so that I can get paid. I'm less and less patient now.
One other thing that they ask a lot of is your liability insurance certificate.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's an easy one too, if you have that as a PDF, that you can just attach that to an email. And most insurance companies will produce that for you, unless the company wants to be named specifically on a certificate, and that happens occasionally. And John, the situation that we were talking about earlier in Las Vegas, I had to name one of those business entities, as on the liability insurance. But we'll get to that in just a second here. Business licenses and permits. I'm always amazed at how few photographers operate without a business license. I'm just astounded when you find out that something's gone sideways with a photographer and somebody complains about it, and then you find out, the photographer didn't have a business license. And
that was the same. I did video for 30 years, and it was the same. All the guys I knew, almost none of them had anything like that, and you would write the check out to their name.
Exactly. Yeah. What is that? And the business license, I don't know. Mine cost me, I think, $75 a year. It's not a big deal. And, the fine's more than that. So, and you might as well just do the right thing.
Well, what about licenses in different towns or cities? I know in South Carolina, there might be one town that I will do business in and have one job, and I may not be back to them for another year or two. And yet, if you buy a license for that particular town, they make you go through a lot of hoops of having to report your income that you've done in the town, etc. And it gets to be almost prohibitive because you've only had one job in that town, but yet you did a license and then they make you go through the whole year and have to report at the end of the year, even if you haven't done any business in that town. What do you do in a case like that, Alan?
I don't ever get a license in a town that my business does not have residency in. So if I'm doing business somewhere other than where my business is located, I don't procure a license for that entity, because I would be getting licensed in hundreds of
Right.
of applications. I mean, the legal opinion that I have received is that the license that you need to have is in the location that you report your income from. And the location I report my income from is my home office. So that's where my license is located. And I'm licensed to work from a home office with no clients coming to my office. That's the kind of situation that I have. I used to have studios, different kind of license entirely. But I didn't have multiple licenses. Now, permits are a different situation. And you may have to procure a permit to photograph in a municipality or or a venue or things like that, but that's not a business license per se. And so more and more there are situations where you have to procure a permit. Certain municipalities, if you're considered a member of the media, they want, and you're doing a commercial photo shoot, even if it's just you walking around with a tripod, they're going to want to make you procure a permit.
And insurance.
And insurance. Yeah, proof of insurance with $2 million liability coverage.
Yeah.
So that's a different situation. And that was kind of like the next line on here was permits. And those can come back to bite you if you're not careful, because I haven't personally had a situation like that, but I've known of photographers who have done a photo shoot, and then the municipality or the venue has seen the photographs, checked to see historically if a permit was pulled on that, and then gone after the photographer and issued a fine to the photographer or the media company because they didn't pull a proper permit for that. So, and the situation with the media is becoming increasingly adversarial between law enforcement, not all law enforcement, I would say federal, certain aspects of federal law enforcement. I don't want to step on anybody's toes here, but I would say the Gestapo in the United States, and without offending anybody, hopefully, but the media is just not got the freedom of the press is under fire, and will continue to be, I'm afraid. And so we're part of that. We're not doing photojournalism per se, but our right to be out there photographing something or anything is under fire. So we just need to be really careful with that.
Yeah, I think it was the Treasury Department that they stopped anyone from taking further photos of the East Wing demolition.
Yeah, and we had a similar situation happen after 9/11. There was kind of this this reaction and enforcement that was not based in the rule of law that happened. And I remember in situations where I was photographing a theater building, which was across the street from a federal building, and I had the federal security move me off that street because they didn't want me taking pictures of a federal building. And it wasn't even pointed that way, but they didn't want me anywhere near it. I had every right to be there. There was no law saying I couldn't be there or any danger to the situation at all. But yeah, I was moved off because they were paranoid and they were in body armor with AK-47s and I wasn't. So anyway, yeah, it wasn't a fair fight.
There was a situation in Washington, D.C., where a photographer was taking a picture of the White House, and law enforcement came up to him and wanted to confiscate his camera. And he told the deputy or the officer there that he had every right because it was a public building and etc. And in the process, it got into a little bit of a heated debate between the officer and the photographer, but a supervisor came up and was wanting to know what was going on, and he explained what was going on. And the supervisor told the deputy to back down, that that gentleman, he had the right to take pictures because first off the bat, it's a public building,
Yeah,
and that he had the right to shoot pictures of the White House. And
a
he
public,
wasn't on the grounds; he was standing outside on the
yeah,
street.
public property, a public building. You're in public. All those things that the law says you have that right. But unfortunately, those with the badges and guns don't necessarily know the law. So
Absolutely, I'm in agreement with you there.
just be careful. Let's go on to the money part of things.
Can I add one more thing?
You bet.
And I don't know if anyone else I've found this useful only in one case, but it was a good one to get into a exhibition preview. But I'm also a member of the ASMP,
Mhm.
the American Society of Media
Yeah.
Photographers. And I don't know if any of you have thoughts on that, but I mean, at least in that one case, and I carry it with me wherever, it gave me a little bit more credibility.
Yeah, I have been a member, not currently a member, but yeah, that definitely worthwhile. We're going to pivot here to banking and money and things like that, and setting up accounts in a business name, and setting up a checking account, a business checking account that is in a business name, and setting up accounts for deposits for things like sales tax if you have to collect it, so that's a deposit account that you then don't have to scramble for at the end of the quarter to find out where all the sales tax went. I mean, I'm in a state where we have to collect sales tax, and that's been a pain in the neck for 45 years. But I know all states are not like that. Also, there was one thing that a banker helped me with early on, and that was to set up a line of credit, an unsecured line of credit, because there's situations. It was called Cash Flow Manager. It's through U.S. Bank, and situations where some months were difficult, and it was nice to be able to have that line of credit when my receivables and my payables did not match. And especially back in the film days where I was spending $1,500 a month on film or more, or I was spending and then $800 a month on processing, and my rent was a couple $1,000 and those kinds of things on the studio, and then I was waiting 60, 90, 120 days on an invoice. And so this cash flow manager, this unsecured line of credit, really helped. And so that's something that a newer photographer might want to consider, that just asking their bank about, based on your business history and receivables, You can usually get one of those, and those really kind of help even out the bumps so that you're not dipping into like a credit card situation, and those are really helpful. Another thing that is more common now is people paying by credit card and company credit card, and setting up a merchant account to do that. And in the old days, you had to set up a merchant account with your bank, and it was, I think mine was $150 a month just for the account, and then it was a per transaction amount, and then a percentage of the transaction amount on top of that. And that's not the case anymore. And you don't even have to do it with your bank. There's the companies like Square and PayPal and Stripe and all of those that you can just set up accounts with really easily and take credit card payments. And I have been in the last couple of years accepting credit card payments. Well, I've been delivering projects COD, so that when they download the file, they have to make a payment in order to download my files for a project. And that has become really nice because they don't have to wait, for payment for a company check or something. And I do that through through WeTransfer is the company that I use. And I know that there's a number that'll let you do that. I know you can do that through PixieSet, but WeTransfer is the one that I do use. I think there's probably others. And the nice thing about that is that I set up the download, and I put the price in there and everything. And in order for them they can preview the images. They're able to look at thumbnails. But in order for them to download that job, they have to actually pay me. And so I get paid on that. They download the files. We're both happy, and I don't have to wait 90 days in order to get paid on that. And so that's been really nice, because I don't know about you, Gerald, but in the old days, it was a long wait to get paid on a company check. And it's tightened up a little bit. Companies are better now than they used to be, but it's still not great. And so I'd rather take a credit card, and I don't care about the whatever the percentage is on that, the 3.5% generally that you have to pay on that. I'd rather pay that and not ding the customer for it, just so that I don't have to wait for it. And I may put a cushion in the invoice in order to cover that. But a lot of companies even now prefer to set up their accounts. I know that Norman, who's not on the call today, he does everything on a credit card account. So he sets up a credit card account with people in order to do business with him, period, and builds everything on a credit card. And so it's nice not to have that whole invoicing and statements and, waiting to get paid and waiting for checks and that whole kind of thing. And so if I were to start a business right now today, I would do everything on a credit card.
Well, I have some of my clients that obviously I get repeated work from them,
Yeah,
and we set up basically a direct deposit. It's
that
set
too.
up, and
Yeah, that's
and
nice.
and it really works fine. I mean, I might have to wait 10 days, but I don't worry about 10 days.
No,
And
no,
and
that's another aspect that works really nice too. Is you got companies that want to just do direct deposit, and that's really a nice situation. Our industry does not work so much with advertising agencies that like we used to. And for me, that was just the worst situation because the agency would wait to get paid from their client. I knew they were getting paid every month from their client, but they would hold on to that money and like a bank, and then they would pay out when they felt like it. And I would, the ad agencies that I do business with, which early on in my career were most of my business, 90% of my business with that was ad agencies. And it would be 90, 120 days on an invoice. And that would kill you sometimes. So really difficult. So let's go back. Let's go back to insurance and talk about that. Any thoughts on that, Gerald? Have you had a good
Well,
experience? Bad experience?
I've had clients that whenever we first started talking about me photographing work for them, they would want they certainly want that certificate. They would tell me that didn't come into play until after we agreed upon, say, a price and the work, etc. But basically, before any work was actually done, the certificate had to be emailed to them. And I'm like you, I do the PDF thing too, and it
Yeah,
really is a good thing doing it that way because it just makes the whole transaction a lot smoother.
yeah. I have at the moment. Well, in the last few years, I've used Allstate, and they make it really simple for me to take care of that online if I need a certificate changed in any way, if I need it customized. So for those who are watching this and don't know, a certificate of liability insurance is required for a lot of jobs, a lot of commercial jobs, especially those with a government entity. And so you have to supply them with this certificate that shows that you are adequately insured. And right now, the number is about $2 million that they expect you to be insured for. As if you're going to walk in with a tripod and a camera and do $2 million in damage. It's laughable, but that's what they ask for, because that's what they ask of any kind of independent contractor that comes through. So you have to have that. And sometimes they will want to be named as a covered entity. And sometimes they just want to have that so that they know that you're adequately covered in case a claim needs to be made. And
I know
so,
a lot of times I get some of mine want, just like you stated earlier, they want their name on the certificate so that
right.
it is, dealing with them. I would just like to ask everybody, is anybody using his cop insurance?
I haven't. I think Doug's stepped off here, and
I've never heard of it.
Okay. Maybe I might better do a little bit more research then. I've been carrying it with Hiscock and not had any problems. If I request the insurance company to send a certificate to one of the clients that I'm dealing with, they have no problems. They'll put the name on it, etc. So
yeah,
it's been kind of a nice situation in that respect, and I don't have any complaints at this point. Thank goodness I've had no claims. So
yeah. I've never had a claim in all these years. Never had a situation like that, and I've issued hundreds of them. So um, photographers are not a very high risk, I don't think. But one of the things I wanted to talk about too is drone insurance, and that's been something that used to be just outrageously expensive. And this past year, I was able to add drone insurance just to my regular policy for not much money at all. And so I've got my drone insurances through Allstate right now, and it's just a rider on my regular policy, and it's not much money. I was doing, separate policies and per flight policies and all that kind of stuff, and not anymore. So I think that the industry's maybe gotten the idea that if it's a professional, and I had to what I did, I had to supply my Part 107 certificate, and there was a couple of other things anyway, so they knew I wasn't a knucklehead with just flying for fun. But that took care of their anxiety about me flying, and I was able to get coverage without any problem. So that's another part of insurance. But also wanted to talk about the insurance that we carry for our business, as far as equipment loss and being covered for travel. because
I'm
there's
sorry,
all,
Alan.
yeah,
Can you just go back 1 second?
yeah.
The drone insurance is then separate from what you would normally carry as, just normal liability insurance?
Most insurance carriers do have an exclusion for drones. So they will not cover your drone under their normal policy. So if you get a business policy, there will be an exclusion for uh, drone equipment. Yeah, both for liability and for the equipment itself.
Just it means my premiums are going to go up then, and I'm going to pay more to State Farm every month.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I mentioned that um, my policy with Allstate went up about $200 a year was all to add the drone insurance coverage for the entire year. And previous to that, the coverage that I was looking at was about $250 a month. So I think the coverage rates have come down dramatically with certain carriers, and you kind of have to shop around. But there's still the situation where you can pay per flight that'll for coverage, and there's those carriers out there. But I think some of the carriers that are just the more normal carriers are not charging as much if you can verify that you are 107 certified and doing this professionally. And then the equipment situation, I've not ever had any significant equipment losses, with the exception of I did have a camera body stolen out of the back of my car while I was next to my car. I had a homeless person that lifted out an $8,000 camera body out of the car, while I was probably 10 feet away, and that was the most significant loss I've ever had. And I was glad I had coverage for that, because that was kind of a devastating situation. But other than that, I've not had anything too significant. But
I had a situation where my I had to put my car in the shop, and I had left one of my lens in the trunk of the car,
oh,
and it was on the property of the mechanic that was working on my car, and someone broke in, took all the stuff, went and ransacked my whole car and everything, and took the lens. And
oh, geez.
I'm fortunate about one thing. My mechanic is absolutely an awesome individual, and he took the thousand something dollars out of his pocket to pay me for the lens, and he says I'll collect the rest of it from the insurance company. So all I did was just take and replace the lens with the money he gave me. So it wasn't any big deal. And of course, I still use the mechanic on my automobile. So
Sure.
uh, I was fortunate.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that is fortunate. It's just most of us are walking around with, $25,000-$40,000 worth of equipment at any one time, and you just can't afford not to be covered for those kinds of things. And all it takes is just averting your eye for a minute, and it could be gone. So um, that's one thing we can't do without. I also want to talk about personal insurance like life insurance and loss of income and disability. For most of us, not all of us, but a lot of us, we're this, we're the sole income, and that's something we need to protect. And so I have always carried um, personal insurance, of a significant level, so if anything happened to me, um, my family didn't need to worry about the fact that I was had chosen this lifestyle of being an independent photographer, and they would be taken care of. And so that's something we need to budget for as well, and not have to try to
I might add,
scramble.
I might add about the disability insurance that you're talking about, Alan, is that if you are actually looking at getting disability if you don't have it, the one thing about disability insurance that you really need to pay attention to is the definition of disability on the
Exactly.
policy itself. Yeah, some policies will read certain ways that if you can do any kind of work, they're not going to pay you.
Right.
But then you need to be more specific in the
Mhm.
definition of disability. So if any of you are looking at this, that's something you might want to pay attention to.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. And it helps to have an insurance advisor that you trust and that's looking out for you. But, carrying a high level of life insurance and some other kinds of coverage, as well as your business insurance, really super important. On that, let's jump to accounting and talk about the accounting side of things and proper business practices. Anybody ever meet with a CPA? That's a fun experience, isn't it?
Oh, I
It's an essential one, though.
yeah, I got to the point where I decided that I would use QuickBooks,
Hmm.
and QuickBooks has been good, but the thing I didn't like was is every time I look around, they want to update it and charge you more money.
Right.
And I don't particularly want all of my business online for everybody else to be able to see what I'm doing
Hmm.
because really and truly it's none of their business. But I think you expose yourself when you do that because the outside forces are able to get in whether you like it or not and maybe can do damage to you, which I don't think any of us want done. So I use QuickBooks and I just use it strictly on my computer. And thank goodness that my wife was a bookkeeper and accountant, and she helps me with some of that. So it works out for me, and I don't have to worry about paying that extra money every so often that they're wanting.
Well, I do the same exact thing, Gerald. I opted not to do the online version, so I'm stuck with the desktop version. And
Right.
in talking to a few people who know more about those kinds of things than me, they said, "Is there anything that it's not doing that you need to do?" And the answer was no. And so I stayed with that, and so I'm perfectly content with the way it's operating now and the way it functions for me. It does everything that my business needs. It just doesn't pay more money to QuickBooks. So I'm good with
That's
that.
and,
And
and it'll print out the forms for you to take to your tax
exactly,
accountant
yeah.
too. So
So and it integrates with TurboTax. So I mean, I can still move those reports to TurboTax, which I do, and that works out just fine for me. So um, but I would say that you got to have a good accounting system going in and continuing on, um, to keep track of things, to know where you are money wise, to take care of. Um, you got to pay the bills, you got to pay your taxes, or you're not going to stay in business. And for a lot of young guys, that's you think that was obvious, but it's not. And so keeping the bills paid, keeping your taxes paid, keeping the money coming in by sending out invoices when you need to get paid, and then sending out statements to tell people they haven't paid you yet. Those seems like obvious things, but I find that with a lot of the people starting out, those are not at all obvious. They just don't know those things.
I'm using the online version,
Uh-huh.
and the only I'd say difference is my accountant he's linked to it, and there's
Yeah.
actually where I can say ask my accountant, and he can clean things up, which I'm
Mhm.
very bad at accounting, and so he will go in and fix problems occasionally.
Yeah, that is one nice thing about that is the remote access that somebody else can have to.
And he actually, when I do my taxes, he pulls up everything that he needs.
Oh, okay.
And so
Yeah.
I don't have to print anything out. I don't know that I'm paying any more for that. I
No.
mean, I don't know what
It's just a subscription that I think you're paying for is all. It's not a big deal, but yeah. And if it works for you, that's well worth the peace of mind. So
You talk about subscription. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna let's go there first and hear what you have to say, and then I'll move on.
Oh, well, no, when you mentioned subscriptions, I noticed here recently that Adobe increased my payment every month that I've been going. So, and the reason I do it every month is because they do keep the software updated and adding new and different things to it. Whereas beforehand, when I first started, I went out and bought the whole entire package, which cost me an arm and a leg, but I prefer to pay it every month because that way it stays current with the latest developments in software. But they took a pretty hefty jump, I thought.
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought that was, um, well, yeah, I wasn't happy. I'm not happy about it. And I'm not happy about the things that they changed on the tool interfaces and things like that.
I'm with you.
I've actually backed down to Photoshop 25 instead of the 26 point whatever it is now, because I just was everything was second nature to me, and now the tool interfaces are all different and they're not second nature, and I find them really aggravating. But that's a different subject for a different day. But let me go on to one more thing here: business forms and contracts. Let's use something that we either find vetted online or go get with an attorney, and then copyright registration. Regular copyright registration so that we can get compensated for people that are using our work without our permission or without paying for it. I brought up Pixie as somebody that I use for my to find licensing infringements and things like that, and copyright infringements. There's others out there. I will tell you that Pixie is the reason that I'm able to retire. So the infringement value that they bring is tremendous. And I only find it just increasing exponentially, the amount of infringements that they're finding. I just am staggered at what's going on. So keeping that stuff registered increases the value of the infringements that they do find, or that we personally find, and go after that. As far as best business practices, as far as correct habits, just the fact of creating an invoice when we do a job and sending that invoice with payment terms on it, or discussing payment terms in our contract ahead of time. These are such basic things that I'm finding a lot of people that come to me with questions and concerns and are in the midst of a problem they can't get paid for a job on. They've missed these really basic steps of, did you talk to this company about what you expected to get paid for, and how, and all this, and when? And the answer is always no. Did you send him an invoice? Well, no. Well, I did. I gave him an invoice, but then I didn't send him a statement to tell him, I didn't contact their accounting department, or I don't know who their accounting department is, or how to contact them. And then they're down the line 6 months and haven't been paid, and they're puzzled and they're upset and they don't know what to do about it. And it's just these really basic things that, you create a contract with terms on it, and then you invoice according to those terms, and then you expect to be paid, and you follow up. And if you don't get paid, you make a call to the accounting department and find out why that hasn't been processed yet, and you don't release new images or new jobs until that's resolved. It's just general business practices. And years ago, I was on the board of as a consultant. I wasn't on the board. I was actually a consultant to one of the photography schools in the United States that was kind of one of the major schools. And we had a parting of the ways because I was very insistent on the fact that they weren't teaching business practices to the level that they should, and that they weren't teaching them, period. Well, they had a basic business class, but I thought of all the things that they needed to teach, they needed to teach business practices, because all these people that they were graduating were going to go out there and become independent business people. They were going to be self-employed, and they had no skills in order to become self-employed. And so, they thought I was just a troublemaker. So we parted ways. But this is just kind of fundamental to being a photographer, is that most photographers, with few exceptions, are all self-employed people. And so all of us here are self-employed people. And we have to know how to do these things. And we spend a lot of our day doing this and not behind the camera. And so these are really fundamental things that we need to understand. So we're approaching the top of the hour here, and I wanted to get to new business. Where do we get business from? And how do we get new business? And, what are the fundamental things we need to understand if we're starting out in business, or if we're in business and things get slow, as they always do? What do we do? Anybody got thoughts on that? What's the first step?
Prospecting.
And where do we start?
Well, one of the things that I did when I first started the business, obviously I was doing any and everything to try to bring income into the company itself. And some of the things I did, found out that wasn't my niche. And then when I found out what my niche was, which is what all the rest of us do, I really went after the business. One thing I learned years ago when I first got out into the world, I worked for an insurance company. And what I learned is prospecting. You never, ever stop prospecting, even when times are great and you have more business than you know what to do with. You keep on prospecting, because those days that are going to be lean will actually come about at some point in time. And if you continue to prospect, what'll help you is that your current clients that you've done business with usually will help bail you out to a point, because repeat business is probably the best business anybody could ever have. And I've done that. And even when times have been kind of lean, all of a sudden I get a phone call from one of my clients saying, "Hey, we need images of this building, da la la." And that just carries me through. And I don't really get down whenever the times are kind of lean, because I have a positive attitude that my clients, because I've taken care of them, they're now taking care of me, and we're moving forward. So from my standpoint and my perspective, I just believe that you never, ever stop promoting your company, your brand, and keep your name out there in front of the public, because in the long run, it will pay off.
Amen to that, Gerald. That's well said. I couldn't have said it better. Yeah. You mentioned about your brand, and I think that is such an important thing, is having a brand that people know who you are and what you do, and as well as what you don't do. They're not going to call you for something that you don't do well, but promoting what it is you do well and continuing to prospect. One of the hardest things for me to learn was that I shouldn't panic when things slow down, because everything goes in cycles. I mean, the first, I don't know, 15 years I was in business, I would start to panic. Things would slow down. And then, it occurred to me, but it took about 15 years. Things are always going to slow down. And then I got to see some patterns in it, and things would slow down, and then they would get crazy, and then they would slow down. And I started, it occurred to me that I should enjoy those times when it slows down and go on vacation or something, and make the most of that, because it was not always going to be that way. So things do go in cycles. But what you said about continuing to prospect and market yourself, that is so crucial to to somebody starting a business and keeping a business. When I first started out, I opened my studio and had no clients. And I opened a studio. I had this studio. I renovated an old house and created a commercial studio, and opened the doors with 0 clients. And I went out and I spent the first 2 weeks with my portfolio under my arm, going to advertising agencies. And after that 2 weeks, I had clients, but they weren't forever clients, and they weren't consistent clients and things. But I kept working at it. But one of the things that occurred to me is that there was a photographer that was just 2 doors down from me who had this fabulous studio, and I was so envious of him. And he had this core of just a few really great clients, one of which was an ad agency. And well, he lost a couple of those clients, and boom, he was out of business. And he was teaching at the community college after that. And I thought, I was so envious of this guy, and he lost his business. And the only thing that was different between us is that I just kind of stayed hungry and just kept going after new business, and kept the cycle going. And he was no longer looking for new business. He just was counting on the business that he had. And that was really the only difference. He was a talented photographer.
I think that goes back to your talking about business practices.
Uh-huh.
I'm running into a lot of very talented photographers, and they don't realize that they're heading out of business just slowly. That underpricing, they're not taking into account that this camera will not last 20 years, and this computer is going to be replaced, and this car insurance that mom and dad gave me this car, I'm going to have to replace the next time. And then I see them, 2-3 years later, and they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
Did wonderful work, hurt me bad because they've underbid, and go, well, you didn't realize you weren't making a living until, you tried to buy the next camera, bought your own car, paid your own insurance. And then they go, oh my gosh, I can't do this. This sounds great. And, and it's easy and I talk to some college classes, and they go, oh, you made that much one day. Go, yeah. And then I didn't work for 12 days,
Right.
So it's not, it's, again, they don't understand the whole package of the business.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, and I hear they go, well, you just don't want me to undercut you. Yeah, I want you to make a living. There's enough for everybody.
I think there is. Yeah.
So
I think one thing that I do, and you're talking about price cutting, I just basically ignore that anymore. When I go in and talk to a new client and we're talking about business, I'll tell them up front, I'm not going to be the cheapest, but I will be the best. And they seem to take light of that when you tell them that, because first off the bat, you may plant in their minds that they're now dealing with a real professional. And in doing that, your elevation in their eyesight just went up. And so now you are at a higher level to be able to talk to this client and not be on that level where people are price cutting and everything else. That some people think that price cutting is what gets you to business, but that's not always true.
No.
And one other thing too that I feel that's important in terms of a business practice and just plain being a good business person is dependability. I
Mm-hmm.
seem to find out sometimes when I run into new clients and they had a photographer, but what happened was is that photographer became uh, undependable, didn't show up in time, uh, one thing or another that would be a negative in the process, and
Mm-hmm.
they eventually just got tired of it. And this is where I say about prospecting, you can call on the same people if they've told you no 100 times, but
Mm-hmm.
one day you're going to come across them and they're going to say, I'm glad you came by. The photographer we've had hasn't done what he said he would do. The one thing I always make it a point of doing, and I'm very religious about this, is to be there on time and be extremely dependable.
Mm-hmm.
If you do those kind of things, I don't think the price question really comes into play
Yeah.
because they know they're dealing with the right kind of person and they're happy with the fact that, if I ask Jerry to do something, I know he's going to do it and he'll be there on time and etc. And to me, that sometimes I don't think you always have to be the best photographer as far as is your skills in photography. And don't get me wrong, quality is important. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that there are a lot of photographers out there. Alan, I could probably never do what you do. I've looked at your work and it is absolutely immaculate. And congratulations on your award that you got too.
Thank you.
But I keep out there plugging at it and keep going, and I keep raising my level of quality. I pay attention to photographers who I know are maybe more experienced than I am, and I look at what they do. I look at composition. I look at angles. I look at lighting, all of it to
Mm-hmm.
try to basically improve my skills as well. But the dependability thing is a big issue. And I think a lot of times we don't ever talk about dependability, and it is something that's important.
I absolutely agree with you. And, being a nice person and, showing up on time, being a nice person and just those kinds of things, I think they count for an awful lot. And at the end of the day, the dollar sign on the invoice is pretty secondary, I think. If they get the images that they need and they're great images, I just don't think they think about the dollar signs. It's like anything else that you buy. If the quality's there and you're happy with the experience, the price becomes secondary. So yeah, well said. I appreciate you adding that. I think this has been a really good discussion. There's some, we haven't had new photographers on these calls generally. I've reached out to a few of our newer members. Actually, I've reached out to a lot of them. They're a little intimidated about coming on here and jumping into the fray because they don't feel like they know enough to really add or contribute a lot. But thank you, gentlemen, for being on this particular podcast. This has produced a lot of good information, which if I were just starting out, I would find this invaluable. I looked for any information I could get when I was first starting out because I was not finding a lot of it in the photography community. Back in the 80s, I just didn't see a lot of information available. And so I looked to other sources for business information, thankfully, and they were solid. And it was mostly about starting small businesses. I went to SBA seminars and workshops. I went to, there were a couple of banks in town that held workshops about how to start a small business and the things to do and watch out for. And all of those, they translated across any business. It didn't matter if it was photography or not. And because of that, I was able to beat the odds. But I remember I had a Kodak rep who came and called on me in my studio when I was had just opened my doors, and he said, you know, here's the statistics. 1 in 10 photographers are in business after a year. And I thought, that's not great. You know, he said nine out of 10 photographers are going to go out of business the first year. And then I said, okay, well, what about the one that stayed in business? Well, of the one photographer, you know, of those photographers, 50% of those are going to be out of business in 5 years. And I thought, oh, geez. You know, this is not good news. And you're here to sell me something from Kodak. So
yeah, it sounds to me that he was being a lot more negative than he was positive in trying to help you out. But I want to mention one thing right quick before we go, is that some of the when we've been in business for a good while, we tend to look for ways to shortcut things. And when we start shortcutting, then we start seeing that the bottom line starts getting smaller. And we wonder, why is it that it's getting smaller? Well, if you go back to your business practices and your basics, you might find that sometimes going back and reviewing basic stuff will open your eyes, and you will see that, hey, I tried to do this, and that might be why my numbers are dropping. And so you go back, and not that you reinvent yourself, but you go back to what made you successful to start with.
Good point.
And that's so important, because I am a prime example of that to some extent. And I've had to go back sometimes and look at what I did basically. And I just went back to doing basic stuff, and that just turned everything around, and it's working. So when you're out there working and you're looking for ways to make your time as profitable, shortcutting is not always the right way to go.
No.
You need to analyze decisions closely.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Gerald. Thank you, gentlemen. This has been a good one. I appreciate everybody's input on this. Hope you're all doing well as we head into fourth quarter here. This is going to be an interesting year coming up. And I think that we're going to have to kind of all do what Gerald said and just reevaluate the basics here to make this a successful year. I'm a little concerned about those who are just new in the business, and because the numbers for the construction industry are tightening up a little bit, and those of us who have our foot in the door, I think we're going to be fine. Those of us who are trying to get our foot in the door, this might not be the best time. So it's going to take some extra effort. Hopefully things will even out, and things will turn around. So I wish you all the best, and any suggestions for next month, please let me know. But until then, I wish you all the best, and stay well. Thank you.
Take care, Alan. Thank you for doing this.
This has been another episode of A Photographer's Life. If you've enjoyed this program, please let us know by liking this episode and subscribing to this channel. A Photographer's Life is brought to you by the Association of Independent Architectural Photographers. This episode is copyrighted and may not be used in full or in part without the written permission of the AIAP. Please join us again soon for another inside look at the world of professional architectural photography.